The slap echoed through first class at 37,000 feet. Flight attendant Brittany Miller's hand still stung as she stared at the black woman she'd just struck, unaware she'd just assaulted her own boss's boss. 3 minutes earlier, Brittany had been live streaming to her 50,000 followers. "Watch me expose this faker in 2A, she'd whispered into her phone. These weren't just black stories or touching stories. This was real life unfolding in real time. Dr. Amara Washington, 42, sat reading an aerospace quarterly report in her tailored Armani suit. She'd shown her first-class ticket twice already. Now Brittany stood over her, phone aimed like a weapon. "No way she belongs here. Probably stole that ticket." The slap came when Amara raised her own phone to record. Brittany's palm connected with Amara's cheek while thousands watched online. Have you ever witnessed someone destroy their entire career in under 10 minutes while the world watched? 8:47 a.m. Boarding begins. T-minus 10 minutes to revelation. The morning had started like any other at Gate B7 of Reagan National Airport. Skylink Airlines Flight SA-447 to Seattle was boarding its first-class passengers. Dr. Amara Washington approached the jet bridge, her briefcase bearing the subtle monogram WAI, catching the morning light through the terminal windows. Brittany Miller stood at the aircraft door, her blonde ponytail pulled tight, her smile practiced and professional, until she saw Amara. The smile flickered, replaced by something harder. "Excuse me, ma'am. I need to verify your ticket." Amara handed over her boarding pass without comment. She'd been through this routine countless times before. Brittany scanned it, frowned, scanned it again. "There seems to be an issue. Can you step aside while I verify this?" The scanner showed green, Amara observed calmly. "That means the ticket is valid." Brittany's jaw tightened. She pulled out her phone, ostensibly to check something, but Amara noticed the recording light was on. The flight attendant was already streaming. "Ladies and gentlemen," Brittany said to her invisible audience, "we have a situation here. Someone's trying to access first class with what appears to be a questionable ticket." Other passengers began boarding, flowing around them. A businessman in a Tom Ford suit passed without inspection. An elderly white woman with a coach ticket was redirected with a warm smile, but Amara remained blocked at the entrance. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see additional identification," Brittany insisted, louder now. Several passengers turned to watch. Amara reached into her purse, producing her driver's license and something else. A Skylink Elite Platinum card, the airline's highest status tier. Only a few hundred existed worldwide. Brittany barely glanced at them. "These can be faked. I'm calling my supervisor." She spoke into her phone again, pretending it was a radio. "Derek, can you come to the main door? We have a security situation." Then, to her live stream audience, she added in a stage whisper, "She's getting aggressive with me." Amara hadn't moved. She stood perfectly still, her expression neutral, watching Brittany's performance with the detached interest of someone studying a particularly fascinating specimen. Her own phone buzzed repeatedly in her pocket, 47 unread emails from board of directors, but she ignored them. Derek Morrison arrived within 90 seconds. The shift supervisor was a middle-aged man whose uniform stretched tight across his midsection. He took one look at the scene, Brittany with her phone out, Amara standing calmly with her documents, and immediately sided with his employee. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked, though his tone suggested he'd already decided who the problem was. "This passenger is refusing to comply with a routine security check," Brittany said quickly. "I've asked her multiple times to verify her ticket, and she's becoming hostile." "I've shown my ticket, my ID, and my Elite Platinum card," Amara said evenly. "I'm not sure what else you need." Derek leaned close to Brittany, but his whisper carried in the narrow jet bridge. "Just move her to economy. Avoid the drama." Amara's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture. She pulled out her phone. "I'll wait while you verify with corporate." "That won't be necessary," Derek said, his voice taking on an edge of authority. Ma'am, you need to comply with crew instructions or we'll have to call security. Brittany's live stream was attracting viewers rapidly. Comments flooded in, some supporting her vigilance, others expressing discomfort. She played to her audience, shaking her head sadly. These people always cause problems, every single time. The phrase hung in the air like a toxic cloud. A young Asian man in 2B looked up from his laptop. An elderly white couple in 3A and 3B exchanged glances. Everyone understood exactly what Brittany meant by these people. I'd like that in writing, Amara said quietly, starting to type on her phone. That you're denying me access to the seat I paid for. The first-class seat on the aircraft leased by... She paused, seeming to catch herself. Just please put it in writing. Brittany lunged forward, trying to grab Amara's phone. You can't record me without permission! Amara pulled back, protecting her device. You're literally live streaming this interaction. That's when Brittany's hand flew forward, connecting with Amara's face with a sharp crack that seemed to echo through the entire aircraft. The slap was captured from multiple angles. Brittany's own live stream, 2 passenger phones, and the aircraft's door camera that Brittany had forgotten existed. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Amara slowly touched her cheek, a red mark already forming. She looked directly into Brittany's phone camera and spoke clearly. The flight attendant for Skylink Airlines just physically assaulted me. The time is 8:56 a.m. We have not yet left the gate. 8:52 a.m. The slap had barely finished echoing when 2 air marshals materialized from the jet bridge. Someone had pressed the security alert button, though later reviews would show it was Derek Morrison, not to protect Amara, but to have her removed. Officers, thank God you're here. Brittany immediately switched into victim mode. Her voice trembled perfectly, tears appearing on cue. This passenger threatened me. I was just trying to do my job, verify her ticket, and she became violent. The first marshal, a tall black man named Officer James Williams, surveyed the scene. His partner, Officer Patricia Santos, was already noting the red mark on Amara's face. Ma'am, are you injured? Santos asked Amara. I'm fine, Amara replied, her voice steady, but I would like to file an assault complaint. She's lying! Brittany's voice pitched higher. Her live stream was now at 75,000 concurrent viewers. The comments section had become a battlefield. I barely touched her. She was reaching for something in her bag. I thought it might be a weapon. An elderly white woman in a pearl necklace stood up from seat 3A. Excuse me, officers, I saw everything. This young lady, she pointed at Amara, did absolutely nothing wrong. The flight attendant has been harassing her since she arrived, and she definitely slapped her, hard. Ma'am, please stay out of this, Derek interjected quickly. We have procedures to follow. Your procedures seem to include assault, the elderly woman shot back. Margaret Hastings hadn't survived 73 years, and the civil rights movement to stay quiet now. I'm recording everything on my phone, too. 8:54 a.m. The online explosion was immediate and devastating. #Skyline. Racist started trending. News aggregators picked up the live stream. Screenshots of Brittany saying, "These people," spread across Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. Skylink's social media manager, sitting in their Dallas headquarters, watched their mentions multiply by thousands per second and reached for their emergency protocol binder. Inside the aircraft, more passengers had pulled out their phones. The businessman in 2B was live streaming on LinkedIn. A travel blogger in 4C was already drafting a post. The cockpit door opened, and Captain Robert Williams emerged, his silver hair and commanding presence immediately drawing attention. What's the situation here? His eyes took in the scene. Brittany still streaming, Derek sweating, Amara standing with remarkable composure despite the red mark on her face, and 2 air marshals looking increasingly uncomfortable. Captain, we need this passenger removed, Derek said quickly. She's been non-compliant and threatened our crew member. Captain Williams looked at Amara, then at the obvious slap mark on her face, then at Brittany's phone still recording. Miss Miller, turn off that phone immediately. But Captain, I'm documenting this for security. Turn it off. Brittany reluctantly ended her stream, but the damage was done. The video had been screen-recorded thousands of times. It was already being uploaded to YouTube, Reddit, and every major social media platform. "Ma'am," Captain Williams addressed Amara, "I apologize for this situation. However, given the disturbance, I think it would be best if—" "Captain Williams," Amara interrupted softly, "may I have 2 minutes to make one phone call? I think it will clarify everything." Brittany couldn't resist. Even without her live stream, she had to perform. "Calling your lawyer? Good luck suing Skylink. We have the best legal team in the industry." 8:56 a.m. The tension in the first-class cabin was suffocating. Every passenger was now watching, their own flights and destinations forgotten. This had become theater, and everyone sensed they were witnessing something that would make headlines. Derek Morrison decided to escalate. "Captain, with all due respect, we can't have passengers making phone calls to lawyers or media. We need to resolve this now. I'm prepared to file formal assault charges against this passenger for threatening our crew member." "With what evidence?" Margaret Hastings called out. "We all saw your employee assault her." "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to be quiet or be removed as well," Derek threatened. A younger passenger, maybe 25, stood up. "Are you seriously threatening an elderly woman now? This is insane. I've got everything on video, too." More passengers began speaking up. The cabin divided, some calling for Amara's removal to just get the flight moving, others outraged at what they'd witnessed. Through it all, Amara stood perfectly still, her phone in her hand, waiting. "You have 1 minute to make your call," Captain Williams finally said, trying to regain control. "Then we need to resolve this." Amara nodded and touched her phone screen. She didn't put it to her ear. Instead, she held it out slightly and pressed the speaker button. The dial tone was audible throughout the quiet cabin. 8:58 a.m. 2 minutes until everything changes. Brittany was already gloating, whispering to Derek about how they'd handled the situation perfectly. "She'll probably call some community activist or something. They always do. Try to make it about race when it's really about following rules." Derek nodded, already mentally composing his incident report. He'd recommend Brittany for a commendation for handling a difficult passenger. Maybe this would finally get him that promotion to regional supervisor. The phone rang once, twice. On the third ring, a familiar voice filled the cabin. Familiar because it had been featured in Skylink's own corporate videos, in business magazines, and most recently, on CNBC. "Good morning, Amara. How's the flight?" The voice belonged to Charles Whitman, CEO of Skylink Airlines. The blood drained from Derek's face so fast that Officer Santos actually stepped forward, thinking he might faint. Brittany's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Captain Williams straightened his tie unconsciously. "Good morning, Charles," Amara replied conversationally. "I'm actually still at the gate, flight SA-447. We've had an interesting situation develop." "Oh? Do you need me to—" "I think you should know that one of your flight attendants just physically assaulted me, on live stream, to about 75,000 viewers." The silence that followed could have been measured in heartbeats. Everyone in first class had stopped breathing. 9:00 a.m. The moment of revelation had arrived. "Amara, did you say assaulted?" Charles Whitman's voice carried through the speaker with the weight of a man who'd just watched his company's stock price flash before his eyes. "Are you injured? Do you need medical attention?" "I'm fine, Charles, but I think introductions are in order." Amara's voice remained impossibly calm, like she was discussing quarterly reports rather than being slapped at 37,000 feet, or rather, still at the gate. "I'm here with Captain Williams, 2 air marshals, shift supervisor Derek Morrison, and flight attendant Brittany Miller, who just slapped me while live streaming to her social media followers." "Jesus Christ," Whitman muttered, forgetting he was on speaker. "Brittany Miller? The one we just featured in our diversity training video?" Brittany's face went from pale to crimson. She had indeed been featured, as an example of excellent customer service. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. "Charles," Amara continued, "I think it's time everyone here understood who they're dealing with. Would you mind explaining our relationship to your employees?" There was a pause. When Whitman spoke again, his voice carried the careful precision of a CEO who knew his words would be replayed in courtrooms and boardrooms. "Ladies and gentlemen, you're speaking with Dr. Amara Washington. She's the CEO and founder of Washington Aerospace Industries. Her company leases 47% of Skylink's entire fleet, including the Boeing 737 MAX you're currently on." The businessman in 2B dropped his phone. It clattered on the floor, the sound sharp in the stunned silence. Whitman wasn't finished. "Dr. Washington also personally holds 31% of Skylink's voting shares, making her our largest individual shareholder. She sits on our board of directors and chairs our strategic planning committee." Amara let that sink in for a moment before adding, "This particular aircraft, tail number N447SW, is actually named after my late mother, Sarah Washington. She was one of the first black women to earn her pilot's license in 1962. I specifically requested to fly on it today for that reason." Captain Williams's hand moved involuntarily to his chest, where his wing's pin sat. Every pilot knew the story of Sarah Washington. She was a legend, having faced down discrimination that made today's incident look tame by comparison. There was a plaque about her in the Smithsonian. "The ticket," Brittany whispered, her voice barely audible. "The corporate account number." "Was 001, Amara confirmed. "The first corporate account Skylink ever issued. To my company. 23 years ago when I leased them their first 3 planes." Derek Morrison's legs gave out. He sat down hard on the arm of an empty seat, his mind racing through the implications. He'd just tried to move the company's largest shareholder to economy. He'd whispered, loud enough for others to hear, that she should be moved to avoid drama. He'd threatened to have her arrested. "Dr. Washington," Captain Williams began, his military bearing returning as he processed the situation. "On behalf of the entire crew, I sincerely—" "Captain, you walked into a situation in progress," Amara interrupted gently. "You had incomplete information, but Mr. Morrison and Miss Miller had all the information they needed. They had my elite platinum card, my first-class ticket, and my identification. They chose to see my skin color first and my credentials never." The elderly woman, Margaret Hastings, actually applauded. "Finally, someone with the power to do something about this nonsense." But Amara wasn't done with her revelations. She pulled out her tablet, swiping to a presentation that had been prepared weeks ago. "What none of you know is that I've been documenting discrimination patterns across Skylink's network for 6 months, not as CEO of WAI, but traveling as a regular passenger to observe firsthand how your crew treats people who look like me." She turned the tablet toward Derek and Brittany. The screen showed a spreadsheet with dates, flight numbers, and incident descriptions. 17 separate incidents, 12 involving your crew at this airport specifically, all documented, recorded, and witnessed. "You were testing us?" Derek's voice cracked. "I was gathering data," Amara corrected. "Because when I present to the board tomorrow, yes, there's an emergency board meeting scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow, I needed irrefutable evidence that Skylink has a systemic problem with discrimination." Officer James Williams, the black air marshal who'd remained silent until now, finally spoke. "Dr. Washington, do you want to press charges for assault?" "That depends," Amara said, looking directly at Brittany, "on whether Miss Miller wants to explain to her 75,000 followers why she felt comfortable saying these people always cause problems about a black passenger. Or whether Mr. Morrison wants to explain why his first instinct was to move me to economy to avoid drama, rather than support a first-class passenger being harassed by his employee." Brittany's phone buzzed incessantly in her hand. Her followers were demanding she go back live, explain what was happening. The hashtag #SkylineRacist had hit #1 on Twitter. News vans were already heading to Reagan National Airport. "But here's what you don't know yet," Amara continued, her voice taking on an edge of steel. The board meeting tomorrow isn't just about discrimination policies. It's about whether Washington Aerospace Industries continues its relationship with Skylink Airlines. Those 47% of planes you lease from us? The contracts are up for renewal in 60 days. Charles Whitman's voice cut through the speaker again. Amara, surely we can... Charles, one of your employees just assaulted me on live stream. Your shift supervisor backed her up. This happened on an aircraft named after my mother, a woman who faced violence for daring to fly planes when people said black women couldn't. So no, we can't just smooth this over with an apology and a flight voucher. She turned back to the assembled group. But I'm not unreasonable. I'm a businesswoman. I believe in solutions, not just problems. So here's what's going to happen next. The entire first-class cabin leaned forward. Even passengers who just wanted to get to Seattle on time were now fully invested in this corporate drama playing out in real time. Mr. Morrison, Miss Miller, you have 5 minutes to decide. Either you resign immediately, effective this moment, and we handle this as a personnel matter, or we proceed with criminal charges for assault, a civil lawsuit for discrimination, and I personally ensure that every major news outlet has the complete footage from multiple angles by noon. You can't threaten us like that, Brittany started, but Derek grabbed her arm. Shut up, he hissed. Just shut up. Don't you understand? She owns the planes. She owns part of the company. We just assaulted the owner. But I didn't know, Brittany wailed. And that, Amara said quietly, is exactly the problem. You didn't think you needed to know. You saw a black woman and assumed she didn't belong here. You assumed she was lesser than. You assumed you could hit me and get away with it. Margaret Hastings stood up again. For what it's worth, Dr. Washington, I've recorded everything from the moment you walked on board. If you need witnesses, you have at least a dozen of us. Other passengers nodded, phones still recording. The travel blogger was typing furiously, already on his third paragraph. The businessman had called his company's legal department to ask about their contracts with Skylink. 4 minutes, Amara said, checking her Patek Philippe watch, another detail Brittany had missed in her assessment of who belonged in first class. The first-class cabin had transformed into an impromptu boardroom. Amara had taken a seat, finally, in 2A, her rightful place, and opened her laptop. The Skylink logo on the loading screen seemed like mockery now. Let me show you something, she said, turning the screen toward Derek and Brittany, who stood frozen in the aisle like defendants awaiting sentencing. This is Skylink's corporate structure. The organizational chart appeared, with Charles Whitman's name at the top, the board of directors below, and then sprawling into departments and subdivisions. She clicked on a small box labeled WAI Holdings, and it expanded, showing connection lines to nearly half the company's assets. Every plane marked in blue is leased from my company, she explained. Lines of blue spread across the screen like veins. Now, let me show you Clause 47.3 of our leasing agreement. She pulled up a legal document, highlighting a section in yellow. Moral turpitude breach. If Skylink employees engage in discriminatory behavior that brings reputational harm to the lessor, that's me, while operating our aircraft, it triggers an immediate penalty of $2.4 million per incident. Derek's face went from pale to green. Per incident. And since this happened on camera with approximately, she checked her phone, 127,000 people now watching various uploads of the live stream, I'd say reputational harm is established. Charles Whitman's voice crackled through the speaker. Amara, I'm looking at the same clause now. Legal is having a heart attack. They should, Amara replied, but that's just the beginning. Captain Williams, are you familiar with FAA Regulation 91.111? The captain nodded slowly. Interference with crew members or flight attendants. Interesting that you mentioned that one. But I was thinking of Regulation 49 CFR 40.261, the one about discrimination in air travel. Miss Miller violated at least 3 subsections. The Department of Transportation takes these very seriously. The fines start at $50,000. She turned back to her laptop, pulling up another document. Now let's discuss the shareholder derivative lawsuit I'm prepared to file. As a 31% voting shareholder, I have standing to sue the company's officers and directors for breach of fiduciary duty. Allowing systematic discrimination that exposes the company to legal liability, that's textbook breach. You planned this, Brittany accused, her voice shaking. You set us up. I documented reality, Amara corrected. You created the situation. I just made sure there was evidence. She pulled up her tablet again, showing a video compilation. 6 months of footage. Different flights, different crews, same problems. Watch. The video showed Amara being questioned at gates, asked to show her ticket multiple times, having her bags searched while white passengers walked by, being asked if she was sure she was in the right cabin. Each incident was time-stamped, located and annotated with the employee's name and badge number. My personal favorite, Amara said with bitter irony, was 3 weeks ago when one of your gate agents asked if I was the cleaning crew, while I was wearing a $3,000 suit and carrying a briefcase. Officer Santos, who'd been taking notes, looked up. Dr. Washington, this is evidence of a pattern of civil rights violations. Yes, it is. Which brings us to the next issue. Amara pulled up a presentation titled Skylink Airlines, a Diversity Crisis. Your diversity numbers are abysmal. 3% black pilots. The industry average is 11%. 1% black management. The average is 8%. 0 black executives in customer-facing roles. She clicked to the next slide. Your competitor analysis. United, 11% black employment. Delta, 14%. Southwest, 12%. JetBlue, 16%. Skylink, 4%. But we have diversity training, Derek protested weakly. You mean the online module employees click through in 15 minutes? Amara pulled up another document. I have the completion statistics. Average time spent, 12 minutes. Average score on the comprehension quiz, 62%. The passing grade you set, 60%. She stood up, moving with the controlled grace of someone who'd given 1,000 boardroom presentations. Let me tell you what this is really going to cost you. Not just the $2.4 million penalty, not just the DOT fines, not just the lawsuits from other passengers who've experienced discrimination. She pulled up a financial projection. When this goes viral, and it's already viral, Skylink will lose approximately 15 to 20% of your customer base. That's based on United's numbers from their 2017 incident, adjusted for inflation and social media growth. That's $340 million in lost revenue in the first year alone. But the real cost? She clicked to a new slide showing contract renewal dates. WAI's leasing agreements expire in 60 days. If we don't renew, you lose 47% of your fleet overnight. You'd have to ground half your routes. Stock price would crater. You might not survive as an independent company. Captain Williams cleared his throat. Dr. Washington, what do you want? Change, she said simply. Real, systemic, measurable change. Not diversity theater, not sensitivity training that everyone ignores, actual change in how this airline operates. She pulled up a document titled The Washington Protocol. This is what I'm proposing to the board tomorrow. Mandatory body cameras for all customer-facing staff, AI-powered bias detection in customer service interactions. The technology already exists. Real-time reporting apps for passengers, monthly diversity audits by an independent firm, and zero tolerance, actual zero tolerance, for discrimination. That would cost millions, Charles said through the speaker. $50 million for full implementation, Amara confirmed. Or roughly what you'll lose in the first week if this continues to spread. Speaking of which, she checked her phone. CNN just picked up the story. Their headline, Skylink flight attendant assaults black passenger who turns out to own the plane. Brittany finally broke. I'll resign. Right now. I'll resign. And, Amara prompted. And I'll apologize publicly on my social media. Mr. Morrison? Derek nodded miserably. I resign too, effective immediately. That's a start, Amara said. But resignations don't fix systemic problems. Charles, I want your commitment on the record that the Washington Protocol will be implemented within 90 days. Amara, I need to discuss this with the board. The board that I sit on? The board where I control 31% of votes and can easily rally another 20% from institutional investors who are terrified of discrimination lawsuits? That board? There was a long pause. Then Whitman sighed. You'll have my support for the full protocol. Good. Now, about Miss Miller and Mr. Morrison. They'll resign, yes, but they'll also participate in a restorative justice program. They'll speak at training sessions about their mistakes. They'll help design the new protocols. They'll be part of the solution. After what they did? Margaret Hastings asked, incredulous. Destroying them doesn't fix the system that created them, Amara replied. But using their experience to prevent future incidents, that has value. She turned back to Brittany and Derek. You have a choice. Be the villains in this story forever or help write a better ending. Your call. The cabin was silent except for the hum of the air circulation system. Everyone waited. I'll do it, Brittany whispered. I'll help. I need to understand why I acted that way. Derek nodded. Me too. I've been in this job 15 years. I never thought I was... But I was, wasn't I? Racist. Acknowledging it is the first step, Amara said, her voice softer now. Charles, are we clear on next steps? Crystal clear. The board meeting is at 9 a.m. tomorrow. You'll present the Washington Protocol. We'll vote, and it will pass. The implementation team will start Monday. Then we're done here. Amara closed her laptop. Captain Williams, I believe we have a flight to Seattle. By the time Flight SA-447 landed at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, the world had changed for Skylink Airlines. Derek Morrison and Brittany Miller had submitted their resignations while still at the gate in D.C. The letters were simple, taking full responsibility, expressing genuine remorse. No legal hedging, no conditional language. Human Resources processed them within minutes. But the real drama was happening in Skylink's Dallas headquarters. Charles Whitman had called an emergency meeting of all C-suite executives. The conference room's large screens showed social media feeds, news coverage, and most damningly, the steadily declining stock price. We're down 12% in 3 hours, the CFO reported. Trading might be halted if this continues. Whitman stood at the head of the table. Dr. Washington has given us a choice. Implement real change or lose half our fleet. I don't think I need to explain which option keeps us in business. The chief legal officer raised her hand. The Washington Protocol she's proposing, I've reviewed it. It's comprehensive but fair. And honestly, it might save us from dozens of individual lawsuits. How did we not know she was documenting this? The head of security asked. Because she traveled like any other passenger. Used her personal name, not her corporate title. Bought tickets through regular channels. She wanted to see how we really operate, not how we perform when we know we're being watched. Back on the plane, as passengers disembarked in Seattle, something remarkable happened. One by one, they stopped to shake Amara's hand. The businessman from 2B handed her his card. My company needs someone like you on our board. The travel blogger asked for a quick interview. Margaret Hastings hugged her. You did what I've wanted to do for 40 years, the elderly woman whispered. But you did it with class. 3 days later, the emergency board meeting convened. Amara presented the Washington Protocol in detail. The room was packed, every board member present, plus legal counsel, diversity consultants, and surprisingly, Brittany Miller and Derek Morrison, who'd been invited to share their perspective. I've been a flight attendant for 8 years, Brittany told the board, her voice steady despite her obvious nervousness. I never thought of myself as racist. I donated to civil rights causes. I had black friends. But when I saw Dr. Washington, I made assumptions based solely on her race. The protocol she's proposing, the body cameras, the AI monitoring. I would have hated it last week. Now I understand it's necessary. We can't trust ourselves to be better without accountability. Derek's testimony was equally powerful. I backed up my employee without question, even when I saw she was wrong. Why? Because it was easier than confronting discrimination. The protocol forces managers like me to actually manage, not just maintain the status quo. The vote was unanimous. $50 million was allocated for implementation. The Washington Protocol would roll out in phases: body cameras within 30 days, the reporting app within 45 days, AI monitoring within 60 days, and full implementation within 90 days. But Amara wasn't done. There's one more component. Every Skylink employee, from baggage handlers to the CEO, will spend 1 day a year working alongside employees from different backgrounds. Not training, actual work. Pilots will work with ground crew. Executives will work check-in counters. Everyone will see the airline from perspectives other than their own. That's unconventional, one board member noted. So is slapping your biggest shareholder, Amara replied dryly. Unconventional problems require unconventional solutions. The implementation was swift and comprehensive. Within a week, the first body cameras were being tested. The reporting app went live early, and within hours, passengers were submitting feedback, both positive and negative. The AI system, developed by a Black-owned tech firm Amara recommended, began analyzing customer service interactions for patterns of bias. The media coverage was intense but largely positive. Skylink leads industry in anti-discrimination measures, read the Wall Street Journal headline. From viral slap to systemic change, how one woman reformed an airline, wrote the New York Times. Other airlines took notice. Within a month, United announced its own bias detection program. Delta expanded its diversity initiatives. Southwest created a passenger advocate position reporting directly to the CEO. The Washington Protocol became a Harvard Business School case study. Business schools invited Amara to speak. She always brought Brittany and Derek with her. Redemption is possible, Amara would say, but it requires acknowledgement, accountability, and action. These two had the courage to face their failures and help build something better. That's harder than simply being fired and forgotten. 6 months later, Skylink's diversity numbers had improved dramatically. Black employment rose 400%. Customer satisfaction scores hit record highs. The stock price, after recovering from the initial drop, reached an all-time peak. At the annual shareholders meeting, Charles Whitman presented the results. The Washington Protocol hasn't just made us more equitable, it's made us more profitable. Turns out when you treat all customers with respect, more people want to fly with you. Amara stood to address the shareholders. My mother, Amara Washington, faced violence for daring to fly. She was shot at, threatened, had her plane sabotaged. But she kept flying because she knew that changing systems requires being part of them. Today, Skylink isn't perfect, but it's trying. That's all she ever asked for, a genuine effort to be better. The implementation wasn't without challenges. Some employees resisted the cameras. Others complained about the sensitivity training. A few quit rather than adapt. But for every employee who left, 3 applied to join a company now known for its progressive values. The Restorative Justice Program became a model for corporate accountability. Brittany and Derek traveled to other companies, sharing their story, helping design bias prevention programs. They became unlikely advocates for change. Their fall from grace transformed into a platform for progress. 1 year later, the aviation industry had fundamentally changed. The Washington Incident, as business schools called it, became required reading in corporate ethics courses worldwide. Brittany Miller never returned to flying. Instead, she founded a consulting firm helping companies identify and eliminate unconscious bias. Her TED Talk, "The Day I Went Viral for All the Wrong Reasons," had 12 million views. She began every presentation with the video of her slapping Dr. Washington. "This is who I was," she'd say. "Let me help you ensure your employees never become this." Derek Morrison became Skylink's first Director of Equity Compliance, a position created specifically to oversee the Washington Protocol. His first act was to review every discrimination complaint from the past 5 years and personally apologize to the passengers involved. Margaret Hastings, the elderly passenger who'd stood up for Amara, became an unexpected social media sensation. Her granddaughter helped her start a TikTok account where she shared stories of standing up to injustice. At 74, she had 3 million followers and a book deal. The Washington Protocol spread beyond aviation. Hotels adopted it. Restaurants implemented versions of it. Retail chains began using AI to detect discriminatory customer service. A tech company created an open-source version that any business could implement. Congress held hearings on discrimination in transportation. Amara testified, bringing charts, data, and most powerfully, stories from passengers who'd reached out to her. The committee recommended making bias monitoring mandatory for all commercial airlines. The financial impact was undeniable. Skylink's stock rose 47% in the year following the incident. Customer loyalty increased by 23%. They won Most Improved Company from 3 different business magazines. The $50 million invested in the Washington Protocol returned over $200 million in increased revenue. But the real victory was in the stories that didn't make headlines. The black mother who flew first class without being questioned. The Latino businessman who wasn't asked to prove his ticket was real. The Muslim family that wasn't randomly selected for additional screening. These non-events, these absence of incidents, were the true measure of success. Dr. Amara Washington continued running Washington Aerospace Industries, but she also established the Sarah Washington Foundation for Aviation Equity. The foundation provided scholarships for minority pilots, funded research into bias prevention, and maintained a public database of discrimination incidents across all airlines. At the 1-year anniversary of the incident, Skylink held a company-wide event. Charles Whitman invited Amara to speak. She brought someone unexpected, Brittany Miller. They stood together on stage, an image that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. "This woman slapped me," Amara said simply. But she also had the courage to change, to grow, to help others avoid her mistakes. That's the kind of courage this industry needs. Brittany took the microphone. "I lost my job, my reputation, my identity as a good person. But I gained something more valuable: awareness, understanding, the ability to see beyond my assumptions. Dr. Washington didn't just change Skylink. She changed me." The Washington Aerospace Industries lease renewal was signed without negotiation. In fact, Amara expanded the partnership, leasing Skylink an additional 20 planes with the provision that they maintain Washington Protocol compliance. The ripple effects continued. Airlines in Europe and Asia began implementing similar protocols. The International Air Transport Association created global guidelines based on Amara's framework. The Washington Protocol became shorthand for corporate accountability. These aren't just black stories or touching stories from the past. They're real-life stories happening right now, showing how one person's dignity and determination can transform an entire industry. Every day, discrimination happens in places we don't expect. But every day, there's also an opportunity to document it, challenge it, and change it. Dr. Washington didn't raise her voice or her fist. She raised standards. What injustices have you witnessed that need exposing? What systems in your workplace or community need reforming? Share your experiences below. Your story might be the catalyst for the next Washington Protocol. If this story inspired you to stand up against discrimination with strategy, instead of just anger, share it with someone who needs to see that real change is possible. Subscribe for more life stories of quiet power defeating loud prejudice. Remember, documentation beats discrimination, strategy beats strength, and dignity beats disrespect. Every single time.